Hello, everybody. This is the 23rd episode of Magnum Opi Podcast. How is everybody?
Good.
Good.
Hello.
Good, thanks.
I can't talk for everybody, but I'm fine.
Yeah. We're all super here.
Thanks for asking.
Okay, on to Dune. On to Frank Herbert. Have you read anything from him beforehand, or was Dune your first experience with him? Because he was a terrific writer.
Yeah,
He wrote
I
all
have-
the books.
my uncle was a physicist, and he loved science fiction, and I have a strong memory of him reading Dune, so I was always curious about it. But I never read anything until now.
Yeah, I had no prior experience to him.
He would be one of those writers who wrote a book that's so famous that nobody knows any of his other books.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the Dune series, did he write a lot of other?
Yes, he did.
Did he? Well, he was prolific then.
Yep. A lot of short. He wrote about 3 different storylines of Dune, something like that. But I'm not really into science fiction, and Dune was the first book I ever read of him. So yeah.
Well,
What
they
do- what do
say
you- What do you think? What was your impression of that book?
Were you asking?
You?
Oh, I must say I was pleasantly surprised, and I would, in my book, see there, I would rank Dune about on the level as Crime and Punishment. So one of the best books I ever read. And despite
Nice.
that, we had a diet of very good books recently.
It was far more readable than Crime and Punishment, I thought.
Oh, most definitely.
it's a different sort of book than Crime and Punishment.
I must say, for the doorstop that it was actually an easy read. It didn't feel as long as it actually was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was actual moments where I wanted to just keep reading, whereas I didn't find that during Crime and Punishment.
But
Also,
yeah,
it's a more light-hearted book compared to the previous other ones of like Blood Meridian and Crime and Punishment.
you got carried along by the narrative and wanted to find out what happened next.
Mm.
Well, I can
Yeah, a lot
imagine
more.
with Crime and Punishment, since it's a somewhat dated book, like it's over a century old. While Blood Meridian is relatively new, so yeah, this was definitely a more easier read than Blood Meridian.
I mean, there was nothing to push kind of Blood Meridian forwards, was there? There was no like, what's going to happen next, because nothing really mattered. It was just a series of events. It was. Whereas this was, very well set out and paced, and
Yeah, there's a lot at stake.
A definite plot driving it forward. So that's one of the this is one of the classical hero's journeys, as in you have a hero, and that some tragedy befalls him outside of his own control, and then he has to fight his way back and go through hell, and then conquer the evil king, and then take his throne, and with the whole father complex that comes along with it. So it's structure-wise, it's really classic. You could easily swap it out in a setting and put it in ancient Greece, and it would still work.
Yeah. No, it's a convincing sort of old-fashioned eternal sort of society. I think Herbert believed that feudalism was the natural state of affairs that human societies would always return to.
Yeah, that's definitely what you see in this book. That there's you have the Bene Gesserit who do really generational planning. So they are really acting in order to improve the situation, not for them, but for generations to come. And everybody's kind of working in that way. So that's like, I'm like, how can I improve my current situation, and for the future, especially the women. But if you then take the men, they're more like in how can I improve my current situation. So the Vladimir Harkonnen is definitely somebody who looks at the now and not at not as much as looking down the line.
The Harkonnen are more degenerate. Well, their leader certainly is.
Yeah.
Well, I have a slide for the faction, so we come later to that.
Of course.
Cool.
Yeah.
Proceed.
We're still talking about Frank Herbert. I know nothing about Frank Herbert.
He had a beard.
He was not as evil as that other hungry Santa Claus. No, but except that he didn't finish the Dune saga, so he got that out 6 out of 7 books, and then other people managed to squeeze a lot of money out about that last book. So it became more and more books, and so we actually don't really know how he wanted to end it.
Yeah, I will just go give a little background about Frank Herbert, or first of all about his works. So Dune got 12 million copies sold. I think when he was 8 years old, he dreamt of being a writer. During the Second World War, he served in the Navy, in the U.S. Navy, as a photographer. And after that, he took a creative writing course at the University of Washington. Interesting. Thomas Sowell took a similar course, I guess, or lesson. After that, he worked as a journalist and wrote a lot of short or stories for pulp magazines. And after that, he tried to get Dune published, but he had to try about 20 times. So a little bit background about him. And he has if you go to his Wikipedia page, you see a lot of works, short stories, the Dune saga, and everything about the Dune lore, if you want to call it that. There's a lot of material there. But as I said, I'm not really into science fiction. I really enjoyed Dune though. But yeah.
I think you might have been influenced by fantasy writers a bit, like Tolkien, for example. So, you have a similar sort of set of, you have, various societies and this kind of sense of doom that might overcome them, and different kind of tribal groups all kind of working sometimes together, sometimes not together. And when the Harkonnen were talking, they were using language just like the orcs use.
Yeah, maybe it's from him being a German, or at least his names are very much German, and he looks like a German, so that could be an influence as well.
Herbert? Could be an English name. No?
Frank Herbert could be.
There's this kind of name that could be either way, but
true enough.
How does that? You mean like as in Germanic sagas and so forth? Or?
Yes, could be, but this is pure speculation.
Yeah.
I think could be that he's German, but this is just me speculating.
He's not German.
Well, Tolkien.
He's not? Okay.
He was born in Washington, United States.
Yeah, but I mean his ancestry here.
Germanic.
We're having a very 40s discussion right now.
I mean, it's almost timely, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyhow, yeah. It seems that he's been influenced by a lot of Middle Eastern stuff. So I think there's also because it's written in the 60s, there's a lot of influence from psychedelic drugs.
Yeah.
As we're talking about the spice melange, that it expands your mind, which is something they would ascribe to LSD as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a lot of that stuff, but there's also a lot of economic stuff going on. So you have one resource that's found in a very limited supply in a very limited place, but is required for the galactic economy. It's a bit like oil. So it has all these things.
It was written, when there was only 20 years worth of oil left.
And ecological as well, right?
Yeah.
Ecological themes.
Well, it's definitely before the oil crisis in the 70s. So before that, people thought they had enough oil to go around, so they were working on things like producing food from oil and stuff like that, which you can do.
Okay, so nothing more about Frank Herbert.
I think he had a son.
We did
Yeah, I think they had
experiment
a few.
with psilocybin. Speaking of the drugs.
But was he into genetics?
Good question.
Well, I guess we would comment about the drug use on the when we talk about the spice, which is a slide as well. Onto the Dune franchise. Franchise.
Franchise.
Yeah, franchise. There, what was wrote by him was Dune, which we currently read. Dune Messiah, after the Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and Chapter House of Dune. And there's a few more, but they're, as beforehand mentioned, were started by him but not completed. And I think as well released after the or released in the new millennium. So yeah.
Hell, there's a lot, isn't it? I don't really feel like I could commit to that amount of Dune, as good as it was.
Maybe one more Dune.
The Messiah is not that long, so it's like just a bridge between Dune and Children of Dune.
I see.
Okay. Onto the legacy, or a cultural product, if you want to say that. There was a old movie, Dune, that was in 1984, and
David
there's
Lynch.
also, sorry, what?
David Lynch directed it.
Okay. And obviously, maybe you heard of it. In the last year, Dune came out as well, or this year.
Yeah,
No,
I've
last
seen
year.
all of these. Have you guys seen
Yeah,
them?
me too.
You have. What is
Yeah.
any of them good or?
The last one was really good.
Yeah, the if you have to rank them, probably the newest movie is the best one. And then the miniseries and the David Lynch movie has its pros and cons, but it's
Yeah. It's interesting, but it's kind of comical in a way. Like it's kind of ridiculous in a way. Like it's strange. It's worth seeing just because it's weird, because it's David Lynch and
it's a David Lynch movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So any David Lynch movie, you have to see it and then ask yourself, from what did I
What
just
the hell
watch?
just happened? Yeah.
Was Fifth Planet also
never seen
David
it.
Lynch, right?
Sorry?
Fifth Element.
No, that's
No.
Luc Besson.
That's Luc Besson, yeah.
Yeah. David
Okay.
Lynch is a real cult classic, kind of surreal, fantastic.
Yeah. He basically got famous after doing his own movie, so he got a big Hollywood movie. See if he could do that, and then they gave him Dune.
I mean,
but
imagine that you do Eraserhead and then they tell you to make Dune.
But the thing is that he didn't have full control, so they kind of cut it up, and because especially the latter half of the book is not in that movie, so it kind of covers the same stuff as the current movie, while the current movie has a second part coming up.
Yeah, the old film, is it a bit? I've never seen it. Is it a bit? I get the impression it's a bit. What's the word for it? Like, yeah, a bit not farcical, but like
It is a bit farcical.
It's quite
Yeah.
campy.
Yeah.
campy. Yeah, that's a better word. Yeah, I got the impression it was a bit like that.
The
Yeah,
thing is, which make the book hard to film, is a lot of people. You can see in a lot of people's head what they're thinking, and it's very hard to translate to the screen. So in that movie, you have people just narrating over themselves, so you hear their thoughts in their voices. The miniseries did this a lot better because they also took the time to tell the story. And the newest movie does it that people are just whispering to themselves in a different language, and you have subtitles. Like people just and it works slightly better. But that's a problem with the book, that it's written from an omniscient point of view. You can look in everybody's head and read everybody's motivations.
also you have the texts interwoven, like the Princess Irulan's writings and
Yeah.
the prophecies and all that kind of thing interwoven into the text. Quite hard to do in a film.
Which is kind of in the first movie, because you have Virginia Madsen, who in the beginning starts narrating that the beginning is the most delicate time. But it's it's Princess Ireland text do not really return in that movie, and she's basically a well-paid extra in that movie.
Yeah, I guess there's none of that in the new movie, is there, with the the writings of Princess?
No, they completely and that's maybe for the best. They completely ignore the Emperor, so you don't see him in that movie. He probably shows up in the sequel, the same thing as in Star Wars. And yeah, that probably works because she doesn't really have anything to do. The original movie opens with I think that the Emperor is talking to the Guild Navigators, and he's explaining the plot of the movie and his plan. And that's
Right.
kind of something that should be revealed in the story. So what I expected actually from the book is that for example that Dr. Huey's role would have been like a big reveal, a big secret, but they just tell it in the second chapter that's going to happen. So the tension actually in that story comes from something completely different than the mystery, like who the traitor is. And then there's some things which the movie has improved. So that first movie, the way the still suits look actually is very different from what the illustrations were to that point, and that actually basically set the tone the way the still suits look. But the special effects are, especially the spaceship sequence, is really slow because you see people traveling, and that's always boring. They completely omit that in the newest movie. But also you have to think that the time that this movie came out, which is 86, that's just around the same time we had Return of the Jedi, which had like really, really impressive space battles. So now you have these slow ships which look like 70s special effects. And on the other hand, the worms are really well done, and all the sand is really well done. So it's really a hit or miss with that first movie.
Yeah, some aesthetically it has some appeal, but the tone of it is so strange. It doesn't have the sort of I don't know, gravity, I suppose, that I think.
Yeah, and Cal MacLachlan is well, actually he's not that much older than Timothée Chalamet, but yeah, he looks more like a man than a boy.
Yeah, doesn't look like a 15-year-old boy.
Timothée Chalamet does a really good impression of a teenager. He's one of those actors in his 30s who could play a high school kid. And that works for Paul Atreides because he basically starts out as a kid and he has to basically overcome and grow. And with the David Lynch Paul Atreides, you have the idea that he's already doesn't really learn a lot. He doesn't physically, he doesn't have to overcome a lot.
Yeah, it's really a coming of age novel in a lot of ways, isn't it?
Yeah. Somebody is under the wing of his father and then loses his father in a tragic event and then has to basically fill in that void. He has to become the Duke, and that's one of the challenges that Paul has to overcome.
Yeah, and there are a lot of interesting moments where when he's alone with his mother, that she realizes that she doesn't even fully know him anymore, and he's kind of taking the reins. And
yeah, but you also with his mother, it's like, where does her allegiance lie? Is it with her son? Is it with the Duke, or is it with the Bene Gesserit sisterhood? Because she's tied to all three of them, and you actually really don't know. So.
She's quite a mysterious character.
Yeah, and so Jessica in the David Lynch movie is actually not that ambiguous. It's quite well defined where her allegiances lie. And it's also because the Bene Gesserits are more aligned with the Emperor, while they're in the new movie, in the novel, they're an independent group. They try to stay in the background and try to transcend all these things because they just want to have their eugenicist breeding program.
Yeah, pretty much.
To create a new Messiah, the Kwisatz Haderach.
Would you like to slither into the summary, Bishop, or do you decline?
Yeah, well, I think I already gave it away. So what was it? A boy gets tied up in an intergalactic trade war and teams up with space jihadis to throw over the empire.
Brilliant.
Space Afghanistan. That's probably the best description.
Arrakis.
I was more thinking about how you call it, Holy Roman Empire mixed up with some Moroccan scenery, and that's about the background for Dune.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's basically Star Wars crossed with Game of Thrones and every other science fiction that's been released
and Lawrence of Arabia.
And Lawrence of Arabia. It's pretty clear that Star Wars was really influenced by this series.
You think
Yeah.
so? With a desert planet and an
Yeah.
empire and
Star Wars
You know,
is all the time. I like this better. I think it has more depth to it.
oh,
yeah,
definitely.
and like stuff like the worms when he rides the worms and stuff. I was just like, yeah. James Cameron totally didn't rip that off for Avatar with his flying blue people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
onto the when we have this summary, we'll go on to the factions in Dune. So we have atop the Paddish Emperor, which is basically shop troops, which are also a house, I guess, or great house. Then the great houses, House Atreides, House
Thank you.
Atreides, House Harkonnen.
Very good.
Yeah, English pronunciation.
Harkonnen.
Yeah, oh, okay, you can read for yourself. There you see all those factions. There you go. Okay, we had it beforehand about basically being a Jesuit about creating a prophecy. What you would like to say about that or add to that?
They're like basically a race of witches, I guess, who are striving to push humanity forwards through careful breeding.
Yeah, their enemies call them witches, and they probably call themselves I don't know, sorceresses or something.
They have some powers which are somewhat, well, they're not supernatural, but they can manipulate people by using a voice or the voice. Which a bit. Do you remember when you were naughty as a kid and your mom would just look at you and you would freeze? That's kind of that effect.
Like that, yeah.
And he
disapproving voice.
Yes, and they are called witches because they manipulate people. So they put spells on people. But they're really they try to intermarry, and they try to intermarry the great houses in order to basically do eugenics and produce the Ubermensch. This kind of has to do with that they have genetic memory, so they can remember everything from the maternal line, but not from the paternal line. So if they would produce a male Bene Gesserit, which is the Kuzak Hadrach, then I could see the genetic memories from both sides and basically could predict the future. So that's the whole lore.
Yeah, which is kind of done in the book, the ceremony and the drugs that they take to be able to facilitate that process of transferring the memories of all the previous what are they called? The mother,
Reverend Mothers.
Reverend Mothers, that's the one.
It's a good plot device to have. It's like limited omniscience, right? So you have the potential for them to have all this power and knowledge, but it's limited by the fact that there's a boy child instead.
It gives also a duality to all their members. Like, okay, what are their motivations? So especially Jessica, who's a member of the Bene Gesserit, but also married into House. Well, no, she's not married into House Atreides, but she's the concubine of the Duke. So not quite his wife, but still the mother of his child. And so she has allegiance to both these factions. So that makes her an interesting person. Like, okay, what she's going to choose. You can't really predict what she's going to do.
Also, it helps that, like, with the Bene Gesserit, you see there's like everybody, like some people refer to them as like witches, but at the same time they serve the purpose. So it's kind of like that uneasy alliance between the other great houses and the Chom alliance. Like they do serve a purpose somewhat in the greater scheme, but uneasily, so to speak.
Yeah, they definitely have a role. So they're not. It's not just like they're not a purely destructive force or something like that. But I mean, they're kind of the priesthood, aren't they?
Yeah, but they are. I think they represent the long-term planning. So if you would compare them to Chom, so all the men, they are members of Chom. That's the big trading thing that basically the economy of the empire, with the emperor being the biggest stakeholder. So if you want to buy anything, then you have to buy it from Chom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the women, they seem to be members of the Bene Gesserit. So they, instead of doing short-term planning, they think about long-term. It's like, okay, what's not my personal benefit, but how does this benefit humanity in the long run?
Yeah, they talk about in some points of the book, don't they? They talk about it being generations, that these decisions are made over, many generations.
Yeah, I mean, this is what elites should be doing. In a lot of ways, I feel like the problems with our elites is that one of the functions of having democratic elections every 4 years, that the planning tends to be very short term.
Yeah, but you also see the balance between the long-term and the short-term planning. So there are short-term problems in this world, and they're being dealt with by a group who focuses on that. But at the same time, there are long-term problems. So there's also a group that just focuses on that, and then the result of that is a very stable society, because they're talking about. I think it opens that it's the year 11,000 something. Don't pin me on the minor years. And that's since the invention of interstellar travel. So that's not our. That could be several millennia after our time, but they. So they have this stable society, which is apparently a feudal society, where you have these layered things, like, okay, you have the houses, and they keep each other in check, and within the house there are ways of doing this. And then so you see all these things being very stable, and it takes quite a lot of effort to destabilize it, which in this case is basically the thing that will destabilize it if the spice stops flowing, if Arrakis stops producing spice.
Yeah, and then it's at the end where they're talking about the Fremen, spoiler alert, but the Fremen have the option to basically destroy the supply of spice, and kind of threatening the guild, and kind of implying that well, I suppose it's multi-layered, like how they're addicted to the spice. When they pull their hoods back and reveal the blue eyes for the first time.
The eyes of Iban. Yeah. So
yeah.
So the spacing guild is completely dependent on spice. They basically, all the navigators would die if the spice flow would stop, which means that they can't safely travel between planets, and that would mean that the whole galactic empire would disappear. And apart from that, you also have a lot of people who use spice just to prolong their life, and the Mentats use it to gain their ability. So there are other uses as well. So basically, the whole infrastructure of this empire is based around spice. The problem is it's only found on Arrakis, and Arrakis is a really hostile desert world. So Tatooine, compared to that, is like paradise.
Interesting that there's a drug, that everybody's addicted to, but it prolongs your life, which is, kind of different than most drugs that a lot of people are addicted to in our present world. They're very, let's say, cocaine or something, or that it's a very powerful thing in the world. Lots of
well, if we had a drug like that, then it would probably be very, very expensive, and a lot of economy would be organized around that.
But opiates are they function a bit more like that because they have a medical use,
Yeah.
But something which, is like it's actually a health tonic kind of thing.
Yeah, but this if you had something like that, this would be a very would have a lot of economic value, as it is here. So basically, the whole the four organizations in the right pillar, except the Fremen, are all dependent on the spice trade, and the Fremen, they live among spice, so they basically have to stay on Arrakis, because living in the desert means that you're constantly exposed to the spice, which means that you will become dependent on it.
I mean, they eat it as well, don't they? They put it in the food. They have spice coffee.
Yeah, there's a beer, a special type of beer.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have the whole trade, and then you have all the houses. They have ownership of Chom, You have the Spacing Guild, which basically controls space travel, so they have a monopoly. And all of that is kind of controlled by the Padishah Emperor, who is the emperor of the known universe, but he is also dependent on the wants and needs of the Spacing Guild. He also has to keep all the houses into balance.
And if any of the houses want to go anywhere through space, then they have to pay, don't they? Quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
Which is also one of the...
So
which is kind of like explained when the Duke, again, spoiler alert, is like when he puts in his plan to take back Arrakis, how much it's going to cost him just to get the Spicer up and running again after vacating the planet and then bringing the mass amount of troops and ships back to Arrakis as well.
Yeah, so the whole book is centered around the fact that House Harkonnen was in control of Arrakis, so they were basically controlling the spice trade, but they're quite brutal, so they did this with an iron fist. So at one point, House Atreides gets the whole spice harvesting on Arrakis, and they want to do it more fairly. So instead of that they use the whip, they will want to use incentives, and people are kind of wary about this. But the reason why they get this is actually that the Emperor wants to get rid of House Atreides because they've become too popular. And by doing it this way, he gives the Harkonnen, which are the enemies of the Atreides, a chance to destroy them. So they vacate Arrakis, give it to the Atreides, and then they attack the Atreides on Arrakis and take over the spice production again. So that's kind of the idea that the Padishah Emperor has, because he cannot directly attack House Atreides. He uses a ruse.
Happens quite quickly too.
Yeah.
And also that the fact that it's Sardaukar soldiers disguised as House Harkonnen soldiers as well, so it puts gives the Emperor an alibi.
Yeah.
I tried to paint the allegiances somewhat similar. For example, red is one allegiance, beige is and orange is one allegiance, I guess, and green and Mentat are one of those overtime schemers, I would assume.
Yeah, Mentat seem to be pretty interchangeable between wherever they're sent, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, they're basically human computers that are just there to do the work. And this has to do with the fact that they used to have thinking machines, but they could too easily be controlled and be used as a weapon. So thinking computers are outlawed, and now they have people who are mentally trained to do all the computations.
I think this is an interesting commentary on our time. Like, I think he was, thinking about, because computers were just really coming into their own in the 60s. And he was commenting on this, Herbert, So he's
if he had only known how bad things would get.
Yeah, how bad things would get.
Well, they were afraid that they would get computers which would outsmart us, which is, given the fact how fast computers were developing, it was not a really strange thought. So what would happen to humanity if there were computers which were like 10, 100 times as smart as us? How could we compete? Because they would just basically convince us to do anything.
Singularity.
Yeah. We just didn't get there, because it turned out that making self-conscious machines is extraordinarily tricky.
Also, the differences between like House Atreides and the Harkonnen are like pretty massive as well. I was thinking the Atreides are the epitome of like a good peoples, whereas the Harkonnen are the epitome of like a bad peoples, even down to like sexual deviancy and gluttony, and just everything about them is negative, and pretty much everything about the Atreides is like upstanding and good.
Yeah, just when we have the Baron basically imagining, there's an implication that he wants to have sex with Paul, right? Because he's
and basically any other young man.
Yeah, he finds a boy who looks like Paul, right? That he's about to abuse. He put him to sleep,
There is like one part of the novel where after he's done scheming, the Baron literally goes, "Just sedate him. I don't feel like wrestling tonight."
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
that's
like,
what I was thinking of. Yeah, and then just after that, we find out that he's actually Paul's grandfather.
Mm.
It's like
that was
ultimate decadent kind of people.
Yeah,
And it's-
reminds me of God-fearing people and people that would visit some certain financier's island.
Mm-hmm. It's the crazy
so-
story.
so grotesquely fat that he has to have a special suit, that basically takes the weight off his legs. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, that's
Also-
one that looks like.
That's done really well in the new film.
Yeah. I mean, in the David Lynch one, he looks grotesque, but he looks just ridiculous. But in the new one, he looks grotesque and frightening.
Yeah, they've done it really well in the new film, I thought.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else about the factions, or do you think we're done with that slide?
We didn't really cover the Fremen.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Oh, those space jihadis.
Yeah.
Basically sand people.
Yeah. It's just the fact that with like this novel is just like the Sardaukar are meant to be like this space marine faction that are like unkillable and dutifully loyal to the Emperor, but then the Fremen just come out of left wing with their weirding way fighting style and just massacre them to like a man, and they're just like, okay, so this is despite years of training, dogmatically the Sardaukar just aren't on the level as the Fremen.
Yeah, basically the Sardaukar are deviants or prisoners that get trained into military service, basically penitentiary battalion.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe the English word, or the Strafbataillon in German, and is used as shock troops. And freemen are just fighting. Freemen are just fighting people that fight that hard because they have to. Otherwise, they would perish.
Yeah, and it's also kind of, they bring kind of like a genetic, Darwinian type thing into it, don't they? With the Sardaukars, basically being on a prison planet and how it weeds out the weak, so what you're left with in this prison planet is like the hardest of the double hardest,
Yeah, and it's like that weird similarity between the Fremen and the Sardaukar. It's like they're both extremes. Like they've been raised, like one with the Fremen, they're born on the planet and they're raised to be these extreme surviving human beings, whilst the Sardaukar are like they're brought onto the planet and then forged into these like fanatics for the Emperor. So it's like the two extremes facing off against each other.
Like when Paul, or it might be his mother, when she first realizes the Fremen are like a basically trained military unit from birth, it's like an entire race of people who are basically a military. Next.
So we have covered everything.
Yeah, I think so.
About the planet Arrakis. Basically, it's a desert planet that is so dry that the people have to wear special suits to repurpose their body moisture. Otherwise, because water is extremely scarce, because it's just a desert planet.
Really interesting theme. It brings out a lot of awareness of certain things. So like at the moment when Paul is grieving his father, and he feels like he can't afford to cry, and then he does cry, and then in the next page, he for the first time he takes a sip of his own the water from the suit, and it's like he's lost water from tears, and then he has to drink a bit of this water for the first time, this flat, tasteless water.
It's also mentioned that crying over somebody or weeping over somebody is a really special occasion. Or, for example, spitting for somebody is really in the beginning scene of the book, there's a scene where one of the freemen is spitting on the table.
Yeah.
And
They think, is
yeah,
this an
and
insult? And it's like,
yeah, but
not
it's it's an offer basically because water's that scarce that you just spit it out and give it up.
the sacrifice. And
Indeed. So
It's also when somebody dies, they say his water belongs to the tribe. So
indeed,
your water is the most valuable thing you have, and just wasting it is seen as a as a crime. There are some near the palace. There are some trees which take a lot of water, and they're seen as holy, since they take a lot of water to maintain. And that's just calculated how many people could we sustain with just the water of these trees.
yeah. Is it a sign of luxury, the trees? Is that it? Or is there something else about the tree?
power.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's also a guy who's basically, it's just his life job to just feed the trees.
Yeah. And then there's a moment when they have the dinner party and the Duke pours out a bunch of water. It's kind of a really tense moment at the dinner table where there are all these different.
Yeah, and then Keynes he pours it into a hidden flask in his pocket, so
Yeah.
he doesn't waste it.
Indeed. Regarding that, on this planet is water so rare. Do you think there's something similar maybe in our reality that something is so rare that we cannot give it up? Because the book Dune got me thinking about it, and I guess the tragic part is I couldn't come up with anything that is that scarce.
Yeah, but then again, we live in an age of plenty.
Yeah, indeed.
That's something people don't realize, that
Hmm.
that things like medicine and water and books and entertainment are so abundant that there's basically no resource where you would say, well, I would die for that resource, because if that's not there, then so many other people would have to die.
If you were to take like a prepper viewpoint of it, what various preppers would say, if there was like a cataclysmic event and most of our infrastructure fell out, the first thing you'd probably have to stock up on most would be salt, because we've become so accustomed to having a lot of salt in our diet. For it to just go away from our food would be kind of like a dramatic effect on the human body. So possibly that, perhaps maybe sugar.
Sugar would be a special. Yeah. They used to pay the Roman army using salt. That's where we get
it'd be anything you could burn as well, because we humans can't survive on the vast majority of the planet, without fuel of some description, be it wood or whatever.
Yeah. No, but even energy in any form is widely available.
At the moment.
At the moment, basically, or at least a giant share of that is to nuclear power and oil. That's the main energy deliverance. But now everybody has that great idea that we just go to quote unquote renewables, that problem will go away. But
turns out that renewables take a lot of power to produce themselves.
Yeah, and the output is horrible. Just to yeah.
Well, I think we're now becoming conscious of oil again, right?
Indeed.
The current political.
It's one of those things that you don't miss until it's gone. And then you notice how hard it was to get it in the first place. And it's even in things like oil pipelines, where we've forgotten how to maintain them because everything is automated. So if there's failure in that, and the people who actually have to know how to do it, they're not there anymore, which means that at some point we'll get a catastrophic event, and then we'll lose a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reminds me of in the end of the Roman Empire, they had a problem that a lot of infrastructure that the Roman built basically never failed, but when it did, they had no idea how to repair it. So they went back in technology-wise.
They were too busy with degeneracy.
So does that remind anyone of anything?
Foundation?
Meanwhile, back on Arrakis.
I know Dutton talks quite a bit about the fact that, that he believes that all indications are that intelligence is going down, and that pretty soon we're going to reach that point where all this equipment that we have.
Enough of this Malthusian mindset.
Okay. Onto the spice. It's as mentioned beforehand. It's basically the one failure point on in this kind of galaxy where it's all revolving around, and it's on the home planet of some not savages. They're quite highly developed, but unruly people, I guess is the right term. So yeah, what could you say about the spice or any additional comments?
The spice must flow. That's
indeed.
the thing.
Let the spice flow.
It's the resource that everybody's after for various reasons. So every faction that we had in the list is after spice for one reason or another. And so having control of that production, having a monopoly on the production is very important, but also a very dangerous thing, because everybody's watching you. And things like quota are important, but also you have to think about that you might be attacked, because you put yourself in a very vulnerable position. So as a narcotic, it's something between LSD and panacea. So
one does think of Afghanistan with the tribes, and then also the poppy fields.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking. That's why I compared it to Afghanistan. I don't know if that was so prevalent back then. Also, LSD is not made from poppy, as far as I know. I think it's a byproduct of a fungus.
Mm-hmm. But I think, I think psilocybin mushrooms is one of what he was also preoccupied with.
Yeah, but it's definitely one of those 60 usages of drugs. So they would think that you could gain a higher form of consciousness. What actually happens with the spice? I think it's called the golden path. Is the thing that Paul sees in the end. It's like he sees in the future, and he's actually a bit afraid of what might happen in the future, because what he sees is that the Fremen, they wage a war on the known universe, and all in his father's name. And that seems to terrify him, that the name Atreides becomes a word that scares people instead of that it makes him happy. But it is one of the possible outcomes that he's going towards. So and he definitely in the sequel is trying to prevent this. But yeah, through spice, since he is the one that is allegedly the Kwisatz Haderach. And being exposed to spice, he is able to see through prescient vision what's going to happen in the future, and that unsettles him. So yeah, it's not all good.
Do we know that what he sees is the future, or is it a possible future?
That I don't think that's actually set in this book. I think the sequels kind of define that.
It is, because he's talking about what he can see and what he can't see, and some things are dark.
Mm-hmm.
And what he has a vision of something that's going to happen, doesn't he? I can't remember which point it is, and then his actions then change that outcome, and then it dawns on him that nothing's set in stone. It's one of those kind of tropes of a time travel type thing.
Yeah.
They change something and then realize nothing's set. Whereas I suppose the other time travel thing is that no matter what you do, the same thing happens, which is kind of the opposite of that.
It depends a bit on the time travel model you use.
Yeah.
He has visions of the future, which nobody else has to that degree, and the result is that he's actually very afraid is what's going to happen. So yeah, on one side he's trying to fight for his own house, and on the other side he sees that the outcome of this might be very, very bad.
Do you think it has something to do with the butterfly effect or something to that effect?
Definitely, but actions have consequences in unexpected ways, and the fact that for example, Baron Harkonnen thinks that Paul is dead means that he no longer pursues him, but a tiny event might have said it in an entirely different way. So.
And there's a lot of talk from like different people of it's like a feint within a feint. You know, everybody's scheming, and it's always a scheme within a scheme and within a scheme. You know, it's no everybody thinks about everything, you know, and all the outcomes. Like everybody's at it, if you know what I mean.
Plans within plans.
Plans within plans within plans. And that's kind of like a common theme, isn't it? Like I kind of feel like.
Yeah, there's a lot of faction scheming. That's one big thing. Well, they do nothing else actually. So the Harkonnen are scheming to get rid of the House Atreides and increase their influence over Arrakis and the Empire. The Emperor is scheming to more or less the same thing. The Spacing Guild is scheming in order to keep the spice flowing. The Bene Gesserit are scheming to produce the Kwisatz Haderach. Nobody knows what the Ixians are doing because they're not yet in this book, but apparently they're also doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of planning and people trying to just to do stuff. It's definitely not a book where somebody is just sitting at a campfire and enjoying life and saying, well, okay, this is good. There's always something that needs to be improved or something that needs to be done.
Indeed.
And everybody's thinking about the future as well. You know, it's that's how it seems anyway.
What I also notice is that almost everybody in this book, including all the servants, are really intelligent. It might be because they are all exposed to spies or something, but they all very knowledgeable, or they're put in that place for a reason. So you always get the impression like even the servants they might have been planned by the Fremen in order to spy on the Atreides.
The only dumb ones are the rank and file among the Harkonnen.
Yeah, but those are fodder.
Yeah, they're the ones who talk like books.
On to the characters.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, we have the Leto of Atreides.
Jürgen Prochnow.
Yeah, he dies fairly quickly. So what's...
Well, he has to, because he is the leader of the House Atreides, and as long as he is around, Paul won't step up, because Paul won't betray his own father.
So he's a very nobleman. Like a very good example of aristocracy.
And he seems to be like pretty much well respected and thought. You know, he's highly thought of. Generally.
He's the kind of leader people want to follow, and you notice that also from his the men. They're all very loyal to him. They all work really hard, and nobody speaks ill of him. He does have his doubts. But yeah, his family is important, and his men are important. And I think he does know he's walking into a trap, but he can't walk out because of honor.
And he places a high value on life as well, doesn't he? Which isn't replicated in a lot of the other houses.
He tries to create a better relationship with the Fremen than the Harkonnen had.
Who were, because they're underestimating the Fremen, aren't they? The Harkonnen. In every aspect, really, in every respect.
Yeah. He's in the process of trying to do that when
He's one of the few people in this book who values human life over spice. And you see that when they rescue the people from the spice harvester, so when they're supposed to be picked up by a carryall, that fails, and then the men on the harvester say, well, we have so much spice on board, why would we leave? And he says, no, everybody leaves, we can always replace a harvester. So you could kind of say that they know that they're short on men, and without men those harvesters can't do anything anyways. But he doesn't doubt about it. It's like, okay, those men are in danger, we're going to rescue them. And this would be completely the opposite of what the Harkonnen would do. They would just sacrifice the men if there was a chance they could save the spice.
Yeah, they've got in the latest film in particular. There's a very kind of like a fascistic, kind of communistic kind of overtones of the Harkonnen, versus the kind of more. I don't know. It's more like a monarchy. It's more of a monarchy than individual, but
more traditionalist monarchy.
Yeah, more value on human life, whereas the Harkonnen are kind of like, nobody cares. Yeah,
I would almost say that they're insect-like, the Harkonnen.
Yeah.
So they have their queen or their leader, and the rest is just doesn't really matter.
A bit like in Starship Troopers, the way the arachnids are described, as a commentary on communism.
Yeah, the workers are not really protected, and they don't care about the individual, but they do care about the brain bugs.
Mm-hmm.
There was also, for me at least, a late Roman vibe with the Colosseum and the drugging up of the quote-unquote gladiators and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was. Yeah, in both in the Atreides and in the Harkonnens, it talks about the kind of gladiatorial and the bullfighting and all that kind of stuff. All that
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Anything left to say about the Duke? Nope. Then about his wife, Lady Jessica.
Concubine.
Yeah, indeed.
He doesn't actually marry her.
Yeah, for a political reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he won't marry her basically because he wants other people to feel like he's still available.
Yeah, their houses are supposed to feel like that they might be able to marry their daughters off to him.
Yeah, marriage here is really like the way that the Habsburgers would marry. So you don't marry for love, you marry for political reasons. So that's in the end why Paul also marries the Princess Irulan.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically doesn't love her or do anything. He doesn't consummate the marriage because he has his concubine, Chani. But the same thing for the Duke. He loves Jessica. While if he would marry, then it would be for political reasons.
Yeah, it's a very much a tool, bit in the way the old royal houses used to operate, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have your royal mistresses and a wife. But in general, the legitimate heir would come from the wife, although the concubines' children would sometimes get into the mix as a possible heir.
I suppose it's putting more of an emphasis on the the man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As opposed to, I don't know, because if you did it the way that the say it is in Game of Thrones, where it's all the woman, it's kind of like the position of the woman, is important as well as a man, where it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter at all. The position of the woman in this story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could say it's very patriarchal, but there is definitely also matriarchy going on.
Yeah, I mean, they could practice polygamy, but they don't seem to. Is there anybody that practices polygamy per se, like with more than one wife?
Well, in this story.
Yeah.
Well, they all do, don't they? They all have concubines and
I mean, more
wives
than
and
wife as opposed to concubine. Concubine is a mistress, official mistress.
Yeah.
But
so no, in the sense of multiple marriages, no. It doesn't seem
like
to,
a Muslim, like a sultan or something with all the.
I think it happens with the Fremen.
Okay, they have.
Now I think you just if you basically if a duel, you kill the other duelist, you take over the how you call it,
the water, isn't it?
Yeah, the household and the water, but you're not directly marrying.
No,
you're just in charge of them for 1 year, and after that, I think you can let them go.
Something but you are responsible for their children.
Yeah. At least, yeah. Anything about Jessica as well, or more to be said?
I mean, she loves her family and is very much a woman of the Bene Gesserit. At the same time, she seems to be quite in all places, if you know what I mean.
Indeed, but I think she goes against her Bene Gesserit training.
Yes, she's been ordered to produce a daughter, so they could marry her off to one of the Harkonnen in order to produce the Kwisatz Haderach. But she loves Leto so much that she gives him a son, and as a result, the male progenitor of that line comes one generation too early. So she's scolded for the fact that she has brought this complete breeding program into jeopardy.
Indeed. Okay. On to the royal servant. Tufir Havat. He's a mentat, and he's responsible for spy defense and offense.
Those are some eyebrows.
Yeah, indeed. Would you say there's an interplay with the mentat and the being just rid of maybe an matriarchal and patriarchal power through the generations and for the households or houses, or not at all?
Yeah, it's like competing models, isn't it? Power.
Okay. Anything about this character?
He's captured at some point and then is forced to work for the Harkonnen, which shows that he says his allegiance is he's kind of gaslighted into it by saying that he what's it called, that Jessica is the traitor instead of Yui.
Yeah.
This is the one who thinks Jessica is the traitor, right?
Yeah, so for a master of assassins, he's easily misled. And so, he kind of meets his tragic end, but he's forgiven by Paul in the end for the fact that he just tried his best. For the rest, he's the one who basically does all the economic calculations for House Atreides, being a mentat.
I don't know why they make him look like he's suffering from herpes in this picture.
This might be a David Lynchian thing, where if you remember that Baron Harkonnen in his version had like all these facial pustulant marks, so all these
almost like a side effect against the spice or something.
Maybe,
it was kind of an allusion to the AIDS epidemic, apparently. But the red thing he has around his mouth is because they consume another kind of drug which gives them mentat abilities. So all the mentats have red lips, and this is the way to basically how they did the makeup. I think in the new movie they just have a red stripe on the upper lip.
Those are Brezhnevian eyebrows.
Those are really Brezhnevian eyebrows. Yeah, it's like a good Eastern European was the Warsaw Pact bloc vibe to it.
Very Stalin-esque, indeed.
Oh, more Brezhnev.
Yeah. Onto Paul Atreides. He's the Duke's son, and he's also, what do you call it?
The
He's
Kwisatz
basically
Haderach?
yeah, exactly. He's basically the prophet. But as far as I understand, there are two different sayings for I guess different prophets, or if you want to say it that way, power levels of prophet, and he basically has both of them.
The Muad'Dib.
Yeah, more deep and
Muad'Dib is a nickname he gave himself.
Doesn't that mean like the desert mouse or something like that?
Yes.
There's one thing though, that this whole Messiah story, it was actually a plan from the Bene Gesserit on Dune. So what they did is in every planet, they thought there would be a Messiah, so they made this generic prophecy, so they could make use of it at some point, which is the Missionara Protectiva. And so yeah, the fact that, and Paul is aware of that, and definitely, as far as I know, and Jessica is definitely aware of this. So the result is that he knows that this whole prophecy that the Fremen have is actually fake, and still he plays into it, and still it seems to fit. But the result is that the Fremen see him as the new as the Messiah who will come to liberate them.
Yeah, it's fake and yet it's kind of true at the same time.
Yeah, and that's a kind of a duality that. So you don't really, you know, it's been planted there, but that does not mean it could not happen naturally.
Yeah, and he plays up to the role, doesn't he? It's, yeah, he encourages it.
Yeah, this is the Kyle MacLachlan.
Do you think he's a bit of a Mary Sue?
Oh yeah, yeah. All these powers that suddenly. Well, he does. We do see him kind of training a bit and so forth, at least.
But like, you know, him and the Bene Gesserit, really. I mean, they all seem pretty invincible. You know, he's super agile. He's awesome at fighting. You know, people love him. He's just like Mr. Perfect.
He doesn't have an Achilles heel that.
You know, he's also a mentat as well, so he can, you know, and he can see through time and space, and he's just like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's like he can do all those things, but at the very end of the book, he realizes his hubris, considering he's just unleashed one of the most like vicious jihads across the universe, and he doesn't know how to deal with it properly. It's like the ends meet the means, and you know, he's just kind of left there going, "What am I going to do with this?"
And he's awesome at riding worms.
Worm rider.
Yeah, after the first book, I think in this book Dune there are different books, and after the first one, I was afraid, oh, this is just now a demagogue, which he kind of was, but at least he had to struggle a little bit. It isn't like some Star Wars movie, I guess, where she's just invincible and nothing happens to her at all. But yeah.
And it does go through all the training that he's had and everything, I guess, and you know why, you know, he's not just some hatchling that can all of a sudden do everything.
That's the thing. Like, there's a moment where he says he's not in the mood for training, and his father says it's not about whether you're in the mood or not. You know, when you have to fight, you have to fight. So there's kind of there's an articulation of actual virtue.
Does he say something like the enemy doesn't care if you're in the mood or something like that?
Yeah, words to that effect. Like you can't. That's neither here nor there whether you're in the mood.
Well, in matter of fact, it's the best to attack if your enemy is tired and doesn't want to fight. So, yeah. On to Stilgard, he's the leader of Freeman section. And he's also the reason why the Freemen are with the House of Atreides Alliance. So, yeah. Would you want to add something about him, or?
He's a bit. Would you say he's pretty dubious of Paul and the others? Like, I don't know. He's a bit more antagonistic than some of the others, I guess. I don't know.
I guess in one point it's about the three main character, and in another he knows if there's a potential leader, he has to fight him, and if he loses, he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's for sure a calculation.
Which he's quite willing to do, isn't he? But Paul knows that they need him.
Mm-hmm. So he comes in with the Messiah complex again to try not to get rid of the most capable man of each tribe for fighting them.
Yeah.
So he has them all on his side, which he mentioned as cutting off his right arm. So
yes.
no left-handedness.
Yeah, none of that degeneracy.
Onto the degenerate Baron.
He's very degenerate. Oh, he's ginger as well, yeah.
And he's ginger.
I see we switched to the miniseries. Is that Robbie Coltrane?
Could be.
No,
I just googled them.
No, it's not Robbie Coltrane.
Oh, it isn't?
No. It's the Emperor. He's ginger in the actual book, isn't he?
I think he's fair-haired, isn't he?
I'm pretty sure it says he's got red hair. I was like, yep, sounds about right.
Yeah.
My ginger stereotype is confirmed. Just like the degenerate, terrible gingers in all the other books that we've read. It's always the gingers.
It's always the way of the ginger.
Prince Harry has fulfilled the stereotype. For a minute there, it was looking like Harry was.
We've got Jack. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, it's just for a minute there, it was looking like Harry was going to redeem the gingers a bit, and then he just completely ruined it.
Yeah, he's never going to do that.
He took it to a new level of irritating gingerness.
But yeah, the Baron's not fat enough in that picture, I don't think. He's not grotesque enough.
Yeah.
That's why I think the new film really nails it.
The new film is kind of a mix between what's it called, a beach ball, and the bad guy from Apocalypse Now. So what's his name? Colonel.
Colonel.
Yeah, you know what I mean. That Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
I don't know. He reminds me of the
Colonel Kurtz. Yeah.
I was saying he reminds me of the grotesque gamer people in that Bruce Willis film, the one where everyone's like inside the virtual world.
Oh, Doubles.
Which one?
It's an animated film.
No. Everybody has fake bodies, right?
Yeah. And when it shows you them in real life, they're just like these big amorphous blobs hooked up to the internet essentially. And he kind of reminds me of that. He's just like his actual physical self is just this grotesque amorphous blob being suspended by this special gadget. And he's just stuffing his face and having degenerate gay boy sex.
So the Baron is really fat, and that's because he raped, what's her name, the Bene Gesserit mother, Hela Mochaim, and basically Jessica is his daughter, but he doesn't know. And as a punishment, she made him inflict him with a disease which made him grotesquely fat, so he can't walk anymore. So he uses suspenders to float, which is a technology they have. But this makes him like this floating ball of fat as it is. And the way he's portrayed in the new movie is that he's really sweaty, and you never really see his face in the beginning. and that makes him really, you feel that he's not somebody to mess with, because he already went through all this shit.
He's vice ridden.
Yeah.
Totally degenerate.
I mean, he's not very PC, is he?
No, he would. It's the kind of guy who wouldn't hesitate to invade a foreign country if there was a good reason to do that.
Yeah,
or he
he's
would
also,
make just one up. He would just made a good reason up, or basically twist and tell half truths to get his way, which basically is what he does.
So he's basically the anti form of a leader to the Duke of House Atreides.
Yeah, he's the exact opposite of the Atreides, basically. The exact opposite. Everything that they are, he isn't. You know.
Yeah, he's not
and vice versa.
Vice ridden. He's ugly. He doesn't care about
degenerate. He's what was it?
He rules through fear purely, not love or loyalty.
And he's also, even his own family, he's got no loyalty to at all. It's just another part of his scheming. When he's
which is basically the undoing of the whole house in the end, because after the death of his two cousins, which are the only family he has left, it means that his house moves to his daughter and his grandson, which is Paul Atreides, which is his enemy, which is really ironic. So in the end, he basically has engineered unwittingly the downfall of his own house.
Yeah, and he's also very afraid as well, isn't he? He's especially when it comes to the Emperor. That whole scene when his nephew is gonna fight the gladiator, and he talks to the Emperor and the Emperor's Bene Gesserit woman. Do you remember that bit?
Yeah, that with that count.
Yeah, and I was listening to that's the one. Because I was listening to the audiobook. I don't really know how it was written, but it all kind of felt really kind of like if there was if the old film was campy, then that was like the closest thing to that. Like it was almost cartoonish, or caricatured was like the level of kind of like evil and degenerateness, in the Emperor and the Baron, and the conversations we're having. If you know what I mean.
Like this, at some point, they're just so awful that you kind of wonder how they stay in power. Why someone doesn't just kill them.
But it's weird because you know how like people criticize, say Trump or even like Boris Johnson for being buffoonish, and that some people claim it's just a cover to throw people off guard.
Right.
And in that scene with the Emperor in the Colosseum, when I don't know how it was written because I was doing the audiobook, but when he's talking in public out loud, he's got this like weird stutter, and there's this sort of quite jovial kind of dialogue between him and the Bene Gesserit wife or whatever she is, and like the Baron, it's really weird. It's all, like I say, it's almost kind of like caricatured. And then when it flips to them having the actual discussion in the was it the Cone of Silence, where nobody can hear and see and spy on them or whatever, and all of a sudden it flips and the stutter's gone, and I thought it was really well done. Like I say, I don't know how it's written in the book, but
I think that's a different character you're talking about.
Is it?
Yeah, I think it isn't in this presentation, but the master assassin for the Emperor.
I was pretty sure it was the Emperor, wasn't it? And when he goes to talk to the Baron about what's happening, and the stutter drops, and
No, it's the Enoch, isn't it?
Oh,
That disciples and all this kind of stuff. And I think he was in charge of Arrakis before the House of Atreides, something like that.
right. Oh, I must have got confused. I thought it was the Emperor, and when he's talking to the Bene Gesserit wife, he's putting on one act. He's putting on an act essentially to throw people off guard. That's how I read it, and I must have been half asleep or something.
Anyway, about the Baron, something else to add, or can we go to the Paddish Emperor?
Let's move on.
God damn it, every time. The Paddish Emperor, Shadim IV. What's about him? Is he a ginger as well, or a fair hair?
He's gone gray.
Yeah, indeed.
He was a ginger, but
Yeah.
He's the problem he has only daughters, and he has quite a lot of them, which means he doesn't really have an heir, which worries him, which brings instability to the whole empire. So he's from the House Corrino. As far as I know, their original planet was abandoned and has now become a prison planet, and they moved to a new planet, which is a paradise. Apart from that, yeah, he's quite a scheming fellow, but in the end he's outclassed because he can't guarantee that the spice flows, so then he loses the backing of the Spacing Guild, and that's how Paul in the end becomes emperor. So yeah, he gambles everything on Arrakis, and he loses.
and Paul marries his daughter, right?
Yeah, just to make his claim to the throne legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking maybe he's how Duke Leto would be as an emperor, but he's in a trap as well, which he cannot escape.
Well, he set a trap, but he hasn't taken into account that he's not the ultimate power in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, it's the Spacing Guild, but they are addicted to spice, so then it's the person who actually controls the spice. So what Paul does in the second half of the book is basically take away control of spice harvesting away from the Harkonnen. And this forces the Emperor to go to Arrakis to straighten the situation out. And that puts him in a vulnerable situation, because then he can be captured by Paul, which happens
Indeed.
in the end. And he's put into exile in the end of the book.
Mm.
Believable fictional universes really rely on certain limitations and being respected in the narrative. So this is a good example of that in a few ways. When you have a resource that's finite, powerful person, but whose power still relies on certain things. The alternative is to have characters with infinite power and no limits, and that people don't find that interesting to read about.
No, it feels like somebody, this could happen to, or has happened to leaders in the real world,
Mm-hmm.
that their power ends because their control over the economy ends, so they lose their power bases.
Yeah.
Which proves that whereas a king could claim that he was sent by God, so he could not be disposed. Here he is basically the head of the economic structure.
It's also interesting how with the Emperor, we don't really see anything of like any unique ability to him, like neither something of a mentat or maybe something that's linked to the Bene Gesserit. He's just this kind of like frail old man in the movies, and in the books he is kind of powerless amongst all this because he relies essentially on everyone else working together with him, such as like the Harkonnen and the Sardaukar. So it's interesting to see that he's kind of in person a very weak man, but compared to, say, when you mention the name the Emperor, you think of this grandiose, powerful person.
He's kind of the placeholder. So there are other people who run the empire. for a large extent, and basically the reason he's in power is because he makes sure that not somebody like the House Atreides doesn't get to a position where they can take over.
Yeah, he's definitely he was kind of you get the impression that he's afraid of the creative destruction.
Yes.
Very much so. Like he feels his precariousness.
He is somebody who keeps the status quo by keeping everything in balance.
He doesn't want. Say the Atreides, that they originally get destroyed because he feels that they might pose a threat because they're very popular and they're so awesome and good and nice to everyone that everybody likes them.
Indeed. Who's the next one? The next one is the revered mother on his side. Jews Helen Mohiam. She's the other scheming bean gymnast and Jesuit. Is she really important to the arc, or is she just a plot device?
She's the one who kind of keeps Jessica in line with the Bene Gesserit. She tests Paul to see if if he's worthy. So they put his hand in the box of pain. She is the one that she's probably. I'm quite sure actually that she's the mother of Jessica as well. So and she's the one that caused Vladimir Harkonnen to be fat. So she's been scheming a long time. So she's important because she sets up the motivations for other people. In the movie, she also acts as a advisor to the Emperor. In the David Lynch movie, this does not happen in the what do you call it? The new movie.
Yeah, in the new one, she's played by what's her name? That '60s actress, very good one. One with the eyes.
I wouldn't know at the top of my head.
Charlotte Rampling.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Charlotte Rampling is a real cult sort of actress that's been in some really interesting films, so she's a good choice for that.
She's kind of unrecognizable in that movie, also because she wears a veil and.
Yeah. Well, glamour is somewhat diminished by various factors, but she's a very good actress. She brings the right sort of gravitas to the role, I think.
Yeah, because the one in the David Lynch movie is kind of silly in the end.
Yeah, again, that's the thing about the David Lynch. Even though it's interesting because it's David Lynch, you feel like it's not. He doesn't take it. It's not taken seriously enough, right? It's all just kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
David Lynch says that he lost. It's not a good reflection of what he was going for because he lost control of it. But I mean, then he often does bring a sort of absurd, like absurdity to his films. Might not have been the right person.
Yeah, that just sounds like something people say. I lost control of it. Yeah, it turned out shit. Sorry.
Yeah. Still interesting to see what they did, but you feel like it just doesn't give the kind of dignity to the film that the book has.
You might be going on thinking, yeah, we'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
Anything to say? Anything more said about this character or not? I guess not. On to the next one.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Want to say
No, I
something?
think we talked a lot about the Bene Gesserit and their motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Indeed, yeah. So, Dr. Leif Keynes, for me, maybe one of the more interesting um, persons for the simple reason that it got me thinking maybe our, the planet Dune or Arcadis is the home planet of the Atreides before they went on the desert planet, and he dreams of something like that for his home planet.
You mean the planet Caladan?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is kind of like somebody once described to me the vision of paradise in the Muslim faith, which is basic in the basic form also like a walled garden where there would be food, and this is kind of the way he sees paradise. Like there's a lot of water, there's a lot of plants, foods aplenty, stuff that that you really miss in Arrakis.
In the desert, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So
even to that, yeah,
what
go
would
ahead. Sorry.
paradise look like for somebody who lives in the desert? And that's what he describes. Interestingly, they have like these rooms in the palace where there are a lot of plants which are cultivated, which are like that. And apparently, but that's a bit of a bit. That's not really told. They have like places where they have like more greenery on Arrakis, like hidden away.
And they try to terraform their planet as well.
Yeah, but that's kind of hard because if they would terraform Arrakis, it would mean that the worms would disappear, which would mean that the spice would not flow, and the spice must flow. So every force in the universe is against you for doing that.
Yeah.
But in his vision, that the plan is to keep some desert back for the worms, for the spice.
Yeah, but also it would be a massive undertaking. Imagine every transaction you do relating this to your daily lives. Maybe put 1% for it away for that your society achieves a goal. Imagine that, and not just spend everything on stupid shit.
I mean, they do it with the water, don't they? They're constantly, putting away little bits of water.
Yeah, that is what I meant. Basically, water has the same status to them as money has to us, basically. But nowadays, money almost grows on trees. So
I don't know. People waste money hand over fist. They don't waste water. Imagine if our government treated money like the Fremen treat water, then things would be different.
Indeed.
Well, nowadays we can't even see. I mean, we used to at least be able to make sense of politics in terms of money. Like, we used to be able to say, well, they'll be doing this for money, or like a given corporation will be acting to make money. But now we have things like woke advertising that everybody hates, and they still do it anyway. We don't even have that. We don't even seem to have the bottom line as something that makes sense of everything.
It's also because nowadays we can produce money. It's
right.
It's a product. It's no longer a commodity. So if the government needs more money, they just money printer goes brr, and then we see that we get inflation somehow miraculously.
Yeah, line go up.
Yeah, so it might turn out that the gold is the new gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard the U.S. now has more debt than exists in the world or something. As money, they have more debt than currency exists in the world or something.
30 trillion debt and U.S. debt, and unaccounted for is let me think. Well, I cannot find it, but because the U.S. debt official is the 30 trillions, and then you have also that is unfunded liabilities. Basically, they haven't found a way to pay it off yet, so it's not officially declared. So yeah, fun times.
Yeah, well, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And he's also, I was going to say, he's also the father of, the woman of Paul's affection.
Yes. And he's kind of interesting, like, bridge figure, because he represents the emperor, but he also is very, very close to the Fremen.
He's a Fremen.
Yeah, he keeps his cards close to his chest. And
he's the conduit, isn't he? He's the bridge between the Fremens and the rest of the universe.
Yeah, he's been like isn't he an honorary Fremen? He's sort of adopted into the tribe. But yeah, he's this, I guess, a figure, maybe a slightly figure of diplomacy, something like that, a little bit mysterious. He's quite a good figure, quite complex.
Yeah, he's definitely he's definitely got two lives going on. He's because they're not aware of the depths of his Fremen side, are they? And presumably, well, I don't know. Yeah, the doctor part. I mean, he assumed that you don't get to be a doctor. I don't know. I don't know what dictate. I don't know how you get that doctor in front of your name in that world.
Yeah.
He never really explained it, but I would assume that he was, if he'd been off world or what have you. It's not like the Fremen have universities or anything.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Well, he never mentioned.
No.
Well, this is our last character. Is there anything else to mention, or a character I might missed, or
the worms? We should touch
The
on
worms.
the worms.
Yeah.
Or what about Huey, who helped with the assassination attempt on the Baron?
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Dr. Huey Lewis.
indeed, that's the other doctor. Yeah, I forgot that one. Sorry.
No worries. I like that scene a lot within the fact that he knew he was going to die, but hopefully to take the Baron with him. So it made for like an interesting, attempted assassination scene, which I think they nailed in the most recent movie. Kind of added that suspense that was missing in the previous movie, the David Lynch one. If it was even one.
I think I'm getting confused between the movie and the book. What was the deal with his wife?
If I remember correctly, I think it's like the Harkonnens took his wife and basically held her to ransom to like have the conditioning over him.
Bang bang.
Yeah, and basically he knew his wife would be tortured. So basically, by doing this, he would set his wife free by letting her die. Because he knew that the Baron would never let her go or let him go.
No.
Yeah.
Dr. Yuen's what? Is this?
Yeah, it's one, I think her name was.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that scene, and also the character itself, like the one who let everybody in and is the true traitor in a sense.
Yeah.
He's kind of an interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
Also because he had imperial conditioning, so apparently everybody just assumed that he was he could not be turned, and it was Baron's great trick that he was able to do it, and that's why also this caused that the Mentat didn't suspect Huey, and that all the suspicions went to Jessica, because she was a Bene Gesserit, so she could not be trusted. And despite the fact that none of this is hidden in the book, so all these plot lines are open. You know who's who, you know everybody's cards, and still it's exciting to read what happens next. So that means it's really well written.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. Huey being the ultimate hyper rational being, the Mentat. Sees the Bene Gesserit who are kind of mystic in the shadows, working through, kind of shadowy means. He doesn't trust them, but he's perfectly willing to trust the way that the Doctor has been conditioned. It's like an appeal to authority, kind of like extreme version. And him being this hyper rational character, I don't know. That's what that was interesting.
Well, there's going to be a series the sequel to the Dune film, so I'm quite happy because I thought that it was very successful, and so if they go on in that vein, then it should be good.
I don't know who's making it.
I think Dennis Villeneuve.
I don't know. I've got no faith in TV series or films for that matter. But again,
I mean, it's the new film that came out in 2021 was the one that was quite successful, and we were all kind of relieved because we were worried that it was going to be super woke, you know?
Yeah.
And the only thing was that they changed this character to a Black woman, but it wasn't too bad. Like the way the character was, done, she did a pretty good job, and it wasn't too, annoying. I mean, I felt like their version of this film slightly restored my faith in the ability of people to make films.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good director. I like the a couple of his other films.
So I mean, if they carry on in that vein, it could be all right.
Well, the fact that the Fremen are quite different, you have to take into account this is millennia into the future. So all the ascendancy that we have had will mean nothing. It's just there are a bunch of people who got on that planet and formed a group. And then so the fact that they're not that they're all quite mixed, the Fremen, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
About the gender swap for Dr. Lee Keynes, it does not really change the character.
Yeah.
So it's still the same motivations. So yeah.
It's pretty good. The Distributist has done a couple of good videos on Dune. One that he did a few years ago, and then in which he argued that a good film version of Dune would never be made. But then he did another one where he said actually a good film version of Dune.
I know somebody who said exactly the same about Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings, that it would just be bad because it could not be done, and then afterwards you say, yeah, okay, this is a good adaptation. I also want to say that this character, Liet Keynes, in the David Lynch version, he's played by Max von Sydow, which is an excellent actor, but it's very little screen time and does not have the heroic ending that, as far as I know, that Liet Keynes has in the new movie. Basically rescues Paul because get rid of the Sardaukars who are following. I think in the book the ending is different, that he's basically left without a still suit in the desert and just dies of heat stroke. So there's a difference there. In the book he's much more political. You have this whole dinner scene which is not in the movie, where basically Paul is tested because the Duke is called away. And he's tested by everybody how good of a politician he is.
I thought it was an excellent scene as well, the dinner scene.
Yeah.
That would be half a movie by itself, that dinner scene.
Yeah. There's a lot of unspoken stuff, so I guess it was.
Just imagine that Quentin Tarantino had to direct that scene.
Yeah, it seemed like it was going to turn into a bloodbath at any minute.
Yeah, and then they talk about strudel for 15 minutes, but you know the undertone. It had a bit of that Inglourious Basterds dinner scene where you sit at a table with your enemy. And he's being nice to you and buying you nice stuff and stuff like that. And then but there's this undertone where you know that he might know your secret, and just playing with you like a cat plays with his prey.
Right.
So yeah, it could have been like if like this was a mini series, that dinner scene would have been a whole episode.
Yeah, there are some open threats to violence as well, aren't there? As well as the undertones.
Yeah. So did we miss any other characters which are important? You have the house servant who gives the Chris knife to Jessica, who basically tells her that they believe that she is the mother of the new Messiah, which confirms to her that the Missionera Protectiva is actually working, the narrative that has been planted by the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, she's an interesting character.
There are you forgot what's his name? We had Duncan Idaho, but we had not. Did we have Duncan Idaho?
No,
No, I haven't
the
had
two
Duncan Idaho.
warriors.
Oh.
The two warriors are
Duncan
maybe
Idaho
important, but yeah.
and the other one. Oh, Duncan Idaho is actually really important in.
Important.
Maybe more important than Paul. And then we had the other
Also-
guy.
Which is the one who gets left in the desert?
Duncan
Oh.
Idaho dies because he's trying to. That's Jason Momoa in a new movie. And then you have the other one who's played by Thanos.
Gurney.
Gurney
Is
Halleck.
it?
Oh,
Yeah.
in a new movie you have like the guy. You have Gurney Halleck, who's played by Josh Brolin, and then you have Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, and it's basically Thanos versus Willy Wonka if you look at their movies. So, but yeah, those are also two important characters in setting up the defense. So, I think Gurney Halleck actually survives until the end of the movie, and he comes back to help Paul during the final fight.
Which is the one that gets left without his suit.
I think that's Lead Kynes, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I think so as well. And what somebody mentioned before, the worms or the makers, how they interact with the spices. They create the spice, don't they?
I think it's worm poop.
Yeah, worm poop, yeah.
It has to be worm poop.
Nice.
Delicious.
Poop that shoots you into outer dimensions.
So the thing is that the worms, they die when they come into contact with water, and that's why they remove the water from the planet, and that's why Dune is so dry. So the thing that makes Arrakis special is also the reason why it's a desert planet.
And also the the Fremen let everyone think that the worms are these monsters essentially, whereas actually they've pretty much mastered them and just use them as transport.
Adorable little worms.
Yeah, a little not, but wasn't there in the first part of the book was mentioned that when you drill for water, at first there will come out a little bit of water, but then it ceases.
Yeah.
As somebody plucks that, are those the worm, or is that mentioned or not? What that is?
I don't think it's actually mentioned. I think
no. It's kind of mirrored in the when they talk about the way the Femins bleed as well.
Yeah.
Also, it's kind of interesting. Like the describing the sandworms is like they're attracted to rhythmic sound, but then also go into a killing frenzy whenever I think it was the shields get turned on.
Yeah. So that's why they can't use shields in the desert. There's another reason not to use shield, because if you use a las gun on a shield, you get an atomic explosion. Don't ask me why, but that's the reason why they have hand-to-hand combat. Because using a las gun would be suicide, because most of these people wear personal shields and most vehicles are shielded. But all of the vehicles in the deserts are not shielded, and that's the reason why the Sardaukar are at a disadvantage, because they're used to fighting with a shield.
I suppose it causes everything to revert back to like an older time, where people had to hand-to-hand combat and, wear knives and things. A bit like, like if have you ever seen a film called Banraku, whatever it's called, where guns have been outlawed, so everybody fights with like samurai swords, but it's set now. It's
basically London.
Yeah. They're a bit more sophisticated though, samurai swords, bit cooler.
Knives here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, a knife is a hideous weapon.
Yeah, it is pretty nasty.
I've heard now all tusks make good weapons.
You trying to slice a loaf of bread using a gun?
Burned our well past for that matter.
Also, isn't the thing with the sandworms is like the crisp knife isn't like their teeth.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a good detail, isn't it?
Yeah, and the fact that it has to be kept close to you or it'll break. So I can't remember. It's like you have to keep it close to your body.
No, it shouldn't be unsheathed or no.
You have to draw blood.
Yeah, if you unsheath it, you have to draw blood.
So again, I think one of the things that makes this fiction really successful is the sense of all these factors, like the limited resources and the you feel like you can enter into the physics of it. You know, you feel like it's a world with limitations, physical limitations that you can feel. You know, where you feel like you're alive in the world because there's a limit on water, things like that. It makes you aware of that they're incarnated beings in this
And
three-dimensional
there's
world.
more than one layer of power politics.
Yeah.
It's not just good versus evils. It's it's as I described it before. It's basically the Holy Roman Empire mixed with intergalactic travel and some desert people.
Yeah. A lot of us are wondering what the future might look like with technology that's used but certain other types of technology that might be limited because they have such a corrosive effect on society, you know. So this is like a possible scenario that kind of feels a bit real.
Well, at one point, a lot of things in quote unquote our universe have to be productive, and a lot of technology at the moment is there just to catch our time or our attention to sell to sell that information, but there's nothing physically made. And or at least in my book, something rather or later will give out in the physical world. Basically, if there's no oil production there, it will be hard. You will be hard pressed for your attention regarding some half-naked woman on some weird app dancing around or something.
Yes. Yeah. Wait. No.
Oh, what else are you going to do if all your basic needs are met?
Yeah,
Or if you think that all your basic needs are met?
indeed.
Yeah, there's certain needs that are they're not being met, but we're being distracted from them.
Yeah, well, it's also about time preference. So do you still want to invest, or are you going to just spend your money to get some immediate gratification?
Yeah.
And that's kind of also what you kind of see in this book. Like you have these Bene Gesserit which go for the long time spent thing, and then you have all the Emperor and the Harkonnen, and they're going for immediate gratification. Especially Vladimir Harkonnen is somebody who goes for that. He has all these vices. And then if Paul's father is somebody who thinks about generations, so he's going for, he's more in line with the Bene Gesserit. So like, okay, what would my house look like in 200 years? What do I need to do to make sure that it's still there?
Yeah, not 100%, because the Baron from the Harkonnen also plans for a smooth transition and for his replacement. But I agree that he's a total degenerate.
He is a total degenerate, yeah.
Okay. Any more characters or themes we missed so far? I can think of none.
Yeah, I can think of any.
Covered a lot of ground.
Indeed. Onto the critical response / popularity, my favorite chart to read out. The problem with this at Dune is also a geological term. So, this graph doesn't really say something, or has no explanation.
Explanatory.
Yeah, explanatory. So yeah, just for shits and giggles, I guess.
Well, it is a really good title because it's really easy to remember, and it really describes the nickname of the planet Arrakis. If the novel would be called Arrakis, people would not be able to remember it. But it's called Dune, a commonplace word. It exactly describes what you would imagine if you would see that planet. It would be one big heap of sand. So yeah, it's an excellent title, which really works well for that book.
Yeah.
But then it really messes up your statistics. I'm sorry.
Yeah. God damn it, Earth! I cannot put you in figures and numbers. I guess
My spreadsheets, my precious spreadsheet.
Yeah, indeed.
They could have called it sandworm poop.
Yeah.
Excrement, the movie.
Yeah, but in the
I
book
think that's
there's
already
about,
taken.
yeah.
I think then we could get into my boss territory, the best watch show of the future.
But
Somewhat dropped out and dropped in again. Yeah, but despite Dune, the name of the book itself is mentioned about 3 times in the book only. Is that about right? Guess nobody knows. But do you know where the name comes from, or the idea that inspired Frank Herbert?
Yeah, I read something about it. Apparently he comes from the northwest of the States, and in Oregon, apparently there's an area where these sand dunes were they were sort of disappearing, and so there was an effort to shore them up using some kind of plant, and he got quite inspired by the landscape of that.
Yeah, what I read that he did some research, probably because he was a journalist as well in his life, that he did some article about a U.S. government program to stabilize dunes. So yeah, a little bit more background than what Justine just mentioned.
It did start the I don't know if it started, but it certainly is the a planet with a single climate trope, which Star Wars does a lot, where you have like a desert planet and an ice planet, and then a planet which is a city, and then how can this be a stable climate?
I think there's a lot more going on Arrakis that's underground. The idea that there is water and there is life, but it's just maybe not as obvious.
Plot inside plots inside plots.
Because I thought there was going to be, I kind of thought that the conversation that they had at the gladiator fight was going to result in some kind of double blind, like some double bluff with Paul at the end, but it didn't. I thought that something was bad was going to happen, but it didn't.
Okay. I guess we will go around and ask everybody how you liked the book, starting with you, Bishop.
I like the book.
Okay, nothing more, nothing less. Quackhouse.
It was very good.
Very good, yes.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, Vog or Talk Tosh, or yeah.
Yeah, I like the book. A lot more easy to read than the previous novels that we've read, and also kind of helps to see what most science fiction has taken a lot of inspiration from this book.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, especially the one that really jumped out, it was the Avatar bit, with the riding of the worm and stuff. It's just, yeah.
Justine?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book. I liked the sort of imaginary reactionary society in the future. Gives me hope.
Hope?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'd like to see in the future. I'd like us to go to something like this.
Okay, very much so. Yeah, for my take, I mentioned them beforehand. It's a very nice book. I really enjoyed it, and it's one of the better ones. And it's nicely flowing, I guess, for reading. So
Yeah, some very good descriptive terms in it. Some very I'm trying to remember some now, but there's just some things that they say in it. Just tickled me.
Okay. Any closing remarks?
Shahlut.
Shahut.
Or anything you might have missed?
Brennan's a scam.
It's probably just the fact this is more, in terms of human relationships, down to earth science fiction novel. Kind of everything feels believable going person to person compared to just bombastic action, futuristic technology. It's still just like human nature is a problem that everyone's trying to work around.
Yeah, and it did that Star Wars thing of it's like it's in the future and it is futuristic, but at the same time it's decayed and old-fashioned at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like a kind of like an epic, a proper piece of literature that is in a tradition as opposed to some kind of total futuristic thing or pure piece of entertainment. It's both entertaining and kind of edifying. Go out and read it, everyone.
Indeed. And on to the next book, that will be The Old Man and the Sea, and this will stream on the 20th of March. If you're interested, click in then. But okay.
Super duper.
Have a good evening.
I doubt it. Everybody watches this, but if you're interested in, I guess, Great Britain and United America in the 17th and 18th century, go to Justine's Brown's Bookshelf channel. Very interesting.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I guess. Good night. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.